Hello and welcome to Future Food with me, your host, Annalisa Winther. If you found this podcast, it's probably because you, like me, are passionate about food and you're curious about how we can use food as a vehicle for change to build a better future. This has been the focus of my work for the last few years. I'm an ecosystem developer, and everything I do centers around how we can unlock partnerships and collaborations within the food system. In my consulting practice, I advise corporations and investors who want to invest in the future of food, but may not know where to start or need help figuring out how to best use their capabilities to make a difference and make an impact. I also coach startup founders in the agri-food space, helping them to attract the right investors and develop their leadership capacity. And since I started this show, many of you have also slid into my DMs asking me how I created my career and how you too can transition into a career working on the future of food. So I also run a one-on-one coaching program called Creating Your Career, where I coach individuals, helping them to transition into and build their dream job working on the future of food. The best way to think of me is basically as a matchmaker. I work with individuals and organizations, helping them to connect to the ecosystem and build long-lasting partnerships that lead to good business and even better impact. This means that I get to talk to all kinds of people along the value chain. It's literally my job to do that. And I started this podcast because I realized how siloed our food system is. It's big, it's global, it's complex, and it's deeply interconnected, and yet many parts of the ecosystem never talk to each other. I believe that the future will be built on collaboration. That's the only way we can really create impact at scale on the timeline that we need to make things happen. And I started this show to share the stories of incredible organizations that I was meeting through my work. These organizations are doing amazing work and they have such a clear vision for the future, but they also need your help to make it happen. So in every episode, I ask guests about their vision for the future, what we're missing to get there, and what help or collaborations they're looking for. They even share their contact information, whether they're an executive or a startup CEO, which you can find in the episode transcript linked in the show notes. And the reason that I do this is to democratize access to each other and foster collaboration. So if you love the work that a guest on this show is doing and you want to work with them, you're interested to learn more, my invitation to you is to reach out. That's the whole point of why I'm doing this. The listeners of this podcast have also had such good success doing so. Some have written me sharing that they found jobs, they've switched career paths, they went to get a new university degree, they launched partnerships, and they even landed investments. Who knows what's possible for you? And I know from putting lots of deals together that there is no better way to connect with someone than hearing their story. When we hear someone's story, it plants a seed and it also just brings us deeper into relationship. So this show is all about making it easier for you to make a move and get that first conversation going. The last thing I'll say before we jump into today's episode is that this podcast is listener supported. So if you love the content I create, or if this show has created value for you, maybe giving you a great idea, influencing how you think, even prompting you to get into some form of a new relationship in the space, please consider becoming a subscriber and supporting the show for a few dollars every month. Your membership will give you access to every single guest contact information, episode transcripts, exclusive content, and premium perks. And you can become a subscriber by following the link in the show notes, and you can learn more about working with me on www.annalisawinther.com. Now let's go ahead and jump in. Today you are in for such a treat. We are going to be speaking with maybe one of my favorite restaurants in the world about how we can use gastronomy as a tool for change, for good, for economic development, for rural development, for social transformation. It's amazing. And why I'm so excited about this conversation is that I got into food in the first place because I realized how powerful food is as a vehicle for change. We all eat, and food is inherently emotional, and it's also deeply experiential, which provides such a unique opportunity for hearts and minds to be changed in the process of interacting with food on a daily basis. And if you've ever had a fine dining experience, or even if you've been traveling and had an amazing food experience, you can probably think back to that time and feel how you were more open in that moment. You were open to try new things. You were open to having a different conversation. You were open to choosing to see and be different. And this is one of the most beautiful things that food has to offer, in addition to the ecosystem that gets built around an incredible food experience or a restaurant. So my guest today is Laura Hernandez Espinosa, and she is part of the mother-daughter duo behind restaurant Leo in Bogota. And how I came to know them is that maybe 1 or 2 years ago, I had the chance to visit Colombia and on an agri-food ecosystem tour. So I went to Medellin, Bogota, and to Cartagena, and got to really see different initiatives that are happening on the ground and understand what's happening in that innovation cluster, in that innovation ecosystem. And as a global ecosystem developer, part of my mission and part of my work is really to visit different agri-food hotspots to understand and build connections with the people who are doing the work on the ground. And while much of the work I do happens online, and it's incredible to be able to connect with people all over the world, there is something about seeing that does make you believe more. And I have found that trips to different innovation hotspots have been so catalytic in terms of really building stronger connections between places and building trust, but also just opening up deal flow and opportunities and connections for collaboration and for more innovation, because there's this sense of knowing who each other are. So there's an aspect of it that can't be removed. And it's why every year I try to make 1 or 2 big trips to new and different destinations and really just have this whirlwind introduction to what's going on and to understand the full potential of where a market is going. Other places I'm dying to go, and I'll plant the seed now in the case that you're hosting a delegation or putting together a delegation or some kind of press tour. I would love to go to Singapore. I'd love to go to Brazil, Japan, and South Korea. And then I have a few different US cities that I'm also tracking closely, as well as some African nations. I mean, the list gets really long, but I have a bunch of cities where I'm plugged in and I'm tracking what's happening, and always thinking about how do we connect the dots of what's happening there with somewhere else so we can spread those ideas and really connect ecosystems, which is powerful. So when I went to Colombia, one of the experiences and introductions and meetings I had that was really resonant, and I mean, I talk about this all the time, I just can't get over it, was dining at restaurant Leo. And the thing to understand about Leo is that Grupo Leo, which is the restaurant group, has the restaurant and then it has a nonprofit arm. And they did this so that they could maximize their potential in terms of really using gastronomy as a tool for economic and social development. And we're going to talk all about how that exactly works today, how they've set it up, the practicalities. They're a great role model for exploring what's possible. And I really wanted to have them on the show because I know many of you as listeners are very interested in how you can build up a strong and resilient local and regional food system. And this is a really cool model for how one of the most biodiverse country in the world is approaching it, just from the work of one restaurant who's then working with others in lots of different capacities to make that happen and to increase that awareness. So Leo itself is split into 2 parts. You have La Sala de Laura, and Laura is our guest today. She is a professional sommelier. Of course, Colombia is not a wine country, so in order to serve something that was representative of the nation, she had to get super creative and innovative. And she's developed an incredible liquid proposal of distillates and different beverages that reflect the different ecosystems and bioregions of Colombia. When you then go downstairs, you have La Sala de Leo, which is her mother's art and her creation. It's a fine dining restaurant that takes you through an incredible journey of understanding the history, like an anthropological lens, just deliciousness lens of what is happening in Colombia and all of the potential. I still have my souvenir from eating with them, where at the end of the meal, you get a menu that shows you all of the different ingredients that you had and where they come from in the country. And there's just a wonderful amount of storytelling that takes place. And again, exposes you to new ingredients you may or may not have ever had before. I remember one of my earliest memories of experiencing new ingredients in a restaurant setting was having insects served to me. And I would never randomly order that or decide to try it unless I had been in the context of the restaurant where they'd opened me up to understanding how it could be eaten in a delicious way. I'll also plug that I've done a great podcast on insects with Melina from Hey Planet, where we talk about the history of insects in gastronomy and how that is a really interesting protein source. I'll put it in the show notes so you can check it out. But one example of even in my own life when I was opened up to something that otherwise probably would have been a no to. So when it comes to who Laura is, she is a professional sommelier, but she also holds a master's degree in developmental studies and an executive's master's in business administration. And then she is the president of Restaurant Leo, or Grupo Leo's nonprofit arm, which is called FunLeo. And FunLeo is very focused on how to develop more channels between the economic and the rural areas, because they are sourcing from all over the country, including indigenous tribes and places where there's no infrastructure. So for them to get the ingredients, they have to do a lot of work on the social level to actually help people open bank accounts so that they can receive the funds for the different things that they're growing or that they're serving. So it's quite fascinating how it all works together. And it's no wonder that Restaurant Leo has been mentioned on the world's 50 best list multiple times. And it's no wonder that Restaurant Leo has been on the world's 50 best list multiple times, both the global list and the Latin American list. So we're going to dive into today's conversation. And my hope is that by the end of this episode, you are going to be filled with ideas of how you can be looking at and considering and using gastronomy, playing with it to create amazing experiences that open up opportunities for development, but also strengthen your local regional food system and celebrate it. Celebrate it in all of its glory and all of its potential. The world is such a rich place, and we do need to go back to celebrating the diversity and the abundance because it is a beauty to behold. Hello, Laura. Welcome to Future Food. I'm so excited to have you here. And I always like to start our journey and our conversation with just your origin story, your background. How is it that you got into gastronomy and into hospitality and into beverages? Where did that come from?
Well, thank you, Annalisa, for having me here today. Okay, so it was something that was not planned. I actually wanted to be diplomat. I have a bachelor degree in foreign relations. And now it's interesting because I am a diplomat, but in a gastronomy level. So I travel all around the countries to tell about the biodiversity, about the ethnicities, about the multiculturality of my country. So that makes me somehow an ambassador of our culture. But yes, my background is very interdisciplinary. I have a master's in development studies, and I also have an MBA. My approach to gastronomy is because it's the tool that I have discovered to serve the world. I like to say this Captain Planet complex. I've always wanted, no matter what the tool is, it to make this world better. So that brought me into gastronomy. And of course, having the influence of my mother and having her insights about food just made me realize that definitely food was the way to impact development, to make social networks around food, around identity, and also to make social businesses. So that's how I ended up in gastronomy. And also I'm a sommelier since I am very young. I have already 20 years old being a sommelier.
Yeah, so your focus today, I would dare to say, is beverages. I don't know if it was a development over time, like you were first looking at gastronomy or gastronomy from this political lens, or it was just you have 20 years of experience as a sommelier. So how did you move into the role that you have now?
Well, I think the way that everything came up was just preparing me to do what I do. Sometimes people ask me, okay, so you're a sommelier, but you're also into development studies and running the foundation. How are you supposed to bring all this together? I always knew that everything was interconnected. So when I was talking about beverages, especially not wine, because I am a sommelier, but I have to say that I am Colombian sommelier. So I work with local fermentations. I work with local distillates. I like to discover all these identity hidden in beverages, in ingredients. to me, it was everything clear. The interconnection between the development and showing beverage as a platform for people to get to know the ecosystems, the cultures. It was very clear. So when I decided to study business, was because I wanted communities and I wanted these people that we were helping to be part of their own development, of their own well-being, to have the tools, but also the business tools. It was not just the anthropological or the speech. It was about helping them to better their income, helping them to develop their small products, into a community project that was able to be commercialized. So it was all, part of the puzzle. Yeah, when people asked me that and I was younger, I got a little bit confused. Like, I don't know how I'm going to, to bring all this together, but I managed. And I think it was part of a higher purpose.
So I think it's good if we set the context of where you work now, which is quite a unique setup. You mentioned your mother and you do work with her. You also are running a foundation. So can you give us an introduction to the world of Leo and the different parts of the ecosystem that you built around this restaurant?
Okay, so Leo is a gastronomy concept, and we offer immersive experiences in two unique settings. And I would say that's Leo and La Sala de Laura. Leo has been for 18 years already, and La Sala de Laura is a most recent concept. Basically, under the vision of my mother, Leonor, and my vision as a sommelier, we merged this culinary philosophy and this liquid gastronomy to create a journey that redefines somehow the Colombian narrative, and also based in our biodiversity and multiculturality. We have this proposal that's called Ciclobioma, and we are inspired by the interconnection between humans, between cultural heritage and the natural environment, and always honoring sustainability and local economies. So we have on the other side FunLeo. FunLeo is our foundation, is our NGO that's been since 2008. And with FunLeo, we work in social projects aimed to rural communities and also urban communities, but most rural communities in vulnerable areas in the country, in this profound Colombia that is not known even for Colombians. So we work together with ethnic groups, indigenous groups in the Amazon, Afro-descendant groups in the Pacific coast, also peasants in the Andean region, and we work with them so they can commercialize their ingredients by adding value to them, by reconnecting with their roots, by diversifying their diets, by generating channels between the rural and the urban areas. And talking about, as I said, new narratives of the Colombian gastronomy. Colombia has always been Eurocentrist, or also giving back to the fact that it's the second most biodiverse country in the world. So we want our communities and us as an industry to look more deeply into what defines us and bring together a way to talk about Colombia in a different way. So that's basically what we've been doing all these years.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, Colombia is the second most biodiverse country in the world, but it's also very multicultural. And when I got to go visit the agri-food ecosystem there, I didn't fully comprehend that until I was on the ground, that you have an enormous diversity of cultures and then an enormous diversity of different organisms and species. So how does that come together? How do you honor that in the work you do and also do these explorations? Because this is as you said, an anthropological, philosophical, historical, gastronomic endeavor that you and your mother and the team you have taken on to really explore what is the heritage of Colombia, past, present, and future.
Yes, well, to me, I would have to say that it hasn't come that clear to me yet. I cannot understand how I keep discovering things. No, really. It's like I've been since 2008 doing this, and it's crazy. It's just fruits just keep appearing, They are, it's amazing. I mean, we have more than 360 fruits. So we can basically eat a fruit a day and not repeat during the whole year. And there are some ecosystems that has not been explored, that are just being explored right now, like the Paramo. We have the high Andean mountain, and it's 4,000 meters above the sea level, and that's crazy. What's there. We haven't explored it yet. We have all the Amazon forest, and you cannot imagine the barks and the seeds and the vines. They all have not just a gastronomic use. We have 26 different ethnic groups, and they have different cosmogonies about the world and the use of the plants. So it's not just for entertainment or for gastronomy, but also for medicinal purposes. So I still do not know how to approach all this richness and diversity. It's crazy.
It's definitely crazy. And one thing I've been in many conversations around is you mentioned that Colombia has this colonial history, as does much of Latin America and honestly many parts of the world. And at the same time, there's an enormous amount of discovery, and it's a feeling of our eyes are opening up to what the biodiversity is, and that we don't have to eat the small amount of things we've been eating. And actually, when we diversify our diets, it's not only good for our health, but it's good for the overall ecosystem because we're moving away from a monoculture and into polycultures, and that has a huge ripple effect. At the same time, we want to give credit where credit is due. And we've seen that some people it's almost like colonialism within food of saying, like, I discovered this or I did this versus paying homage to the source or the indigenous wisdom or where it might have come from. In the work that you're doing, which is so much, I'll call it pioneering in terms of introducing new ingredients to the world and giving people an interface and a platform to meet those where they might not otherwise venture to go discover this. How do you pay homage or give credit where credit is due and really help people to understand where these ingredients come from?
Of course, yes. Well, Leo is a platform. We are always speaking about this biodiversity, this multiculturality. We're a voice, we are a channel. To us, the most important thing is to talk about producers, small producers. We give names. We're constantly mentioning the projects. It's always about us as Colombians and not about a chef or a sommelier. So giving credit for us is everything, because we are not, we're not alone in this process. It's quite interesting that right now we are contributing by buying $50,000 a month. And in local currency is not bad, $50,000 is 200 million pesos only by buying without intermediation to small producers in rural areas.
Basically buying direct from the farmer with no cuts of intermediaries.
Yes. So what we do is we buy directly to small producers and family projects without intermediation. And that's very tough work. Sometimes formalization, sometimes the transportation, even the level of education is quite hard to manage for a restaurant. It's about commitment. Sometimes you need to help them into opening a safe accounts, also like getting the papers that the law applies, the basic documentation for selling. We also, sometimes there are indigenous people that Spanish is not the main language, so it's hard to communicate, and there's no like super infrastructure. So sometimes the products cannot be sent because the river is high, or maybe because the plane didn't depart because of the climate, because of the weather. So it's quite a challenge.
How do you split these activities between doing what a restaurant normally does, cooking food and serving it to people? And, obviously you buy from your different vendors and purveyors. And then all of this work, which you just mentioned, which is building out infrastructure, helping people open bank accounts. Like, is that under the restaurant's umbrella? or is that more on the foundation side of things? Because I'm curious about how you designed
Yeah.
your business model to split this work and really support you, because one needs to support the other for this to keep working and this to keep going.
So this is a great area between the restaurant and the foundation, because the foundation helps initially in getting in touch with the community, in helping them discover those products, those ingredients that they can commercialize. We also teach them how to add value to it. But also the restaurant department of procurement is always in touch with this as producers. So we've been working with someone for 18 years, and it's the same person that's been doing it for 18 years. So he's totally into what we do. She knows, and her name is Adhania Arroyo, and she knows exactly how to approach, how to help them. We have this because different restaurants do it in different ways. So always payments are 15 or 1 month or 2 months. We know that we have to pay them almost immediately, but we also know that we have to build a plan, that we also have to build a plan where they can get better and start waiting for the payment for a little longer. So just 1 week, maybe 15 days. So teaching them a little bit of savings and planning and thinking that they are a business now.
There's so many unforeseen challenges that when you start something and then you're like, oh, okay, we have to do this as well and figure this out. I think it's good now to paint a bit of a picture of the experience, the transformational experience that you take diners on and people that interact with the restaurant. So you are in Bogota, in Colombia, the capital, in the Chapinero district. It's becoming like a pretty gastronomic hotspot with a lot of really cool restaurants and things happening. But can you explain how in La Sala de Laura and La Sala de Leo, you have the two journeys you take people on and how you expose them to this multicultural and biodiversity journey?
Okay, so yes, Chapinero is a place that it's a neighborhood that preserves its neighborhood structure. Yet you still see the bakery around the corner, the laundry service that's been there for 20 years. Among all that, there's like restaurants and cool places and cafes. So we love it. It's a very democratic neighborhood, and we love to be there. So yes, well, we have, as I said, two concepts. And basically the difference between the two spaces is that, well, Leo and La Sala de Laura share a 2-level building that visually is connected by a garden and that is suspended like over a glass volume. And this space, a part of being the transition, between different environments, because they both have different environments, symbolizes this diversity of Colombia and how we just not only have a solid gastronomy proposal, but also a liquid gastronomy proposal. So first you enter on the first floor. There's like this impressive kitchen that offers a menu, tasting menu experience. And this allows guests to explore new gastronomic frontiers about a hidden country. And without all that, without leaving the table. You can travel all around Colombia without leaving the table. And also a pairing that can be non-alcoholic or with fermentations and wines, but very, very creative and local options always. And in La Sala de Laura, then we go upstairs to the second floor. And this is like my avant-garde cocktail place. It's a selected range of not just wines from around the world, because I love it. I love wines from around the world. I am a sommelier, so I do love wine. But it's like a bistro style cooking with a great atmosphere, with a little bit of music, like you can have music in Leo as well, but I used to put a little bit higher to the volume. and it's the same of Leo in terms of philosophy, but translated into a cocktail proposal. It's something that you would not find anywhere else in the world, because we do our own spirits. We encapsulate our ecosystems in a proposal that's called Territorio Ciclo Bioma. So we have a palette of colors from the Páramo to the foothills to the mountains. Like, it's 7 different types of spirits that we make ourselves just for La Sala de Laura. And we blend it together with vermouths that are also made by us, and bitters made with the different barks all around Colombia. So you will get immersed in a liquid proposal that is not about the traditional cocktail recipes. You have to go like with your mind open. And right now, for example, we have a bird watching menu. So the bird watching series is about Colombia being the most diverse country in the world in terms of birds. What we do is we have 9 different birds, and we got inspired by the bird in terms of their character, their ecosystemic service, in terms of their feathers, their behavior, and we made up this series that's called bird watching. But yeah, that's Leo and La Sala de Laura. That's
Oh, I
basically
love it. I became a bird watcher in the pandemic and it changed my life.
really.
So now I'm like, I need to get on the plane and come eat this. I love
You have to.
it.
I became also a bird watcher, and it's amazing. I mean, what it teach us, the patients, the world of the birds, what they can teach you is amazing. Is something that I've just
Yeah.
discovered, and of course, I had to make it into a cocktail program.
I love that. I also have to say, we pay money to go on safari in Africa or elsewhere. But actually, if you pause and look in your backyard, and I do think this is like a huge blessing that the pandemic gave, I started to realize that I can go on safari every day. Like I can just literally go sit in my backyard, and then suddenly I'm seeing all these different animals. And even now, looking out my window, I'm like, I know the squirrels that live in our backyard. We have certain hawks who come every day. We have other kind of birds that like frequent it and they live here. Same with a fox. And we have deer. I'm 30 minutes from New York City and we have all this going on right there. But I would in past years be like, I need to go to Africa to go on safari, to connect with nature, to da da da. So, it's always a process of understanding what's in your backyard. I do want to highlight that you mentioned before that while you're a trained sommelier, you're a Colombian sommelier. And I think something I found quite interesting is how you adapted that because Colombia doesn't grow wine. It doesn't have the culture of wine. And of course, as a restaurant, you could import wine and serve that in a fine dining context. But you really looked at what does it mean to have these drinks from that represent Colombia and territorios. In Spanish, the translation is a territory. I'm not sure how we would say biocyclica, but like the biocycles or the different biospheres or bioregions would be the corresponding word, I think. So can you talk a little bit more about that aha moment of being like, I can be a Colombian sommelier and it doesn't have to look like pure wine, old world, new world?
Okay, there were a couple of aha moments. And okay, the first thing is that I remember that Pitu Roca, Josep Roca, uh, one of I think, the best sommelier in the world. And it's because he's such a good person. He's such a nice human being. Okay, I admire him so much. So he was visiting us. I was wondering, how could I impress this guy? I thought I didn't have the ways, the tools. I didn't have the wines. I thought everything that I could serve on the table was going to be just whatever. And I said, like, you know what? I'm just gonna go with what I have learned, and I'm just gonna serve the fermentations, the garage fermentations that I found in the island that I visited a year ago, or the fermentations that the Inca group are doing since ancestral times in the Putumayo region, or the Chuchuhuasa in the Amazon region. I don't know. I was, I said, I want to impress this guy, and it's not with wines. But that was one aha moment. The other series of aha moments where that's my mother has this powerful food, has these amazing dishes. And I started saying, like, you know what? It's so hard to pair your dishes because this has so much umami. This is so powerful that no matter how many wines I open, I think they're just not into what I'm trying to express by somehow being a curator of your dishes. Because the sommelier is a curator of the, we establish the order of the menu and we just enhance the art of the chef. So I wasn't being able to do it through wines. So lately I understood by talking to a biologist, a very renowned biologist, that's Brigitte Baptiste, director of the Humboldt Institute in Colombia, that is one of the most renowned institutes for biodiversity and research. And she said to me, you know what? The reason that a chuchuwasa or a or a copoasu juice pairs you in a nice way with what a pirarucu or fish from the Amazon, for those biggest fish in the Amazon, and it's very consumed. It's because there's something that it's called coevolution. And that means that the ingredients of an ecosystem, because they have developed together, they pair well together and they make sense together. And Europeans have known that since forever. That's the way people in Galicia pair albariño from Galicia with some scallops of the Rias Baixas. And that's why French people, Bourgogne, pair a coq au vin with a Pinot Noir. And that's the reason why matches that have been traditionally known for being a match pair in heaven work. And that's why I started to discover that Colombian flavors paired well with Colombian beverages. So I had many aha moments, but also the fact that people wanted to come here to Colombia because they wanted to try the real flavor of Colombia, because they wanted to try everything, and the beverage repertoire was part of it. So I started, to be proud of these artisanal beverages, of these very rudimentary distillations, and just believe that this could have a place in all cuisine, a place in the world, and start, making them better, basically.
So I think from this point, it's great if we give a little bit of context into the food side of things, because you are on the drink side, but as you mentioned, your mother is also a force. She's a very well-known chef, and she is running Leo, which has the tasting menu, and also is a spotlight on a lot of different foods from across the country. And the two work hand in hand. They're in the same space. You also provide the beverages for that tasting menu. And when I ate there, I was blown away by the menu I also received at the end, which is a beautiful parting gift that showcases where each and every ingredient came from and really like the journey you went on in gastronomy. And I thought that after having so many foodgasms and just like amazing storytelling around each dish and trying new things I'd never known existed, like you just mentioned a fish from the Amazon I had no idea about. That was a very cool way to articulate the story. But more than that, I think we should talk a little bit about your relationship to your mom and how you two work together and how you came together in business and came together in this project, because that feels like an important point to supplement the work you're doing with the territorios and then the work we do with the food ingredients.
Yes. Well, my mother, she has introduced me into an anthropological way of seeing gastronomy. And she encouraged me to study for sommelier. She has visionary points of view. And I admire her stubbornness in believing in the power of Colombian traditions and biodiversity. And, believing that those were important assets, not only to achieve social transformations, but also for strengthening cultural identities. Definitely, that was her idea.
When you were a kid, was this already an idea that you heard her talking about, that like it was a natural progression of I'm going to work with my mom one day? Or how did it come to be then that you were like, okay, well, let's do this together?
Well, she had me very young. She had me at 22-year-old. So we got to work together this whole idea when she decided to found the foundation, FunLeo, in 2008. She had this believing in Colombian traditions, in Colombian biodiversity.
Had she already been cooking at that point and made a name for herself, or where was she in 2008 in terms of having that platform?
She's an economist and she studied arts. She used to work in publicity. And by 2008, she just had opened 3 years ago the restaurant Leo. She used to be a consultant for other restaurants when she decided to open Leo in 2005. So in 2008, she created a foundation. And in 2009, I called her. I was living abroad. And I said, you know what? I love this project of yours, this foundation. Let me just give you a hand with this because this is truly something. Um, so I came back to Colombia, and then I decided to study development and to apply all this knowledge into the foundation. So when she started it was just only about the traditions and helping documentate and doing some research of the traditions of the ecosystems, and also helping visualize all these tradition cooks, especially women all around the country. So when I got here, I started seeing it as something else. And we started working under the motto Gastronomy for Development, understanding that gastronomy could be this engine for development in so many ways, not just by documentation or visualizing or helping with the cooks, but also from different points of view. Since Colombia was just entering a peace process, we thought that it was very important, the dialogues, bringing together communities, helping bridges so that they could sell their products. I think the idea originally was hers, but I've been feeding it, till now, and we've been working it together. And one thing is that we complement each other in our expertise, in our abilities. I also used to work in the managerial and financial activities more than she did, and she's very creative. And very operational driven. And I believe that we have created a good team, based in our own talents, in our own personalities. And I think that sharing passions with my mother is a blessing, and it's a pleasure. And it's also very defiant in many ways. But we have important affinities in many subjects, and of course many other areas that we have some discrepancies.
Did she teach herself how to cook? Because in this story it sounds like she was like, I'm going to open this project, and now when I look at what Leo has become, it's like pretty incredible food that's being served. So was that learned on the job?
Yes.
Wow.
She's an empirical cook. For her, gastronomy is just one way of manifestation of her art. So she studied art, and she chose gastronomy as an art to manifest herself. And you know what? Talking about that, I've also taken this like art conception. I mean, I think she's influenced me in the way of seeing, like, for example, the way that I create the menu, the cocktail menu, all these cocktail menus are basically series that work like art series, like a musician works in an album, you have same colors, it has a cohesion, it has something that it's a message that englobes the whole proposal. And that is a very artistic way to see gastronomy.
I love that it gives respect to the value, though, because artists need to evolve, as do chefs, as do businesses, and they need to change with us as we grow and change. And I know when I work with entrepreneurs, coaching them, that's often a question of how do you evolve with your business, and how does it not lose the value, or you getting judged on your past versus where you're going and everything like that. A little bit related to this, I do want to ask you about how innovation happens within the restaurant and within the drinks proposal. Because you're working obviously with new ingredients, that's an amazing source of inspiration. But even then, in translating it and coming up with the recipes in that collaborative process, it is also, of course, more than just you and your mom. You have a big team that supports you. So, can you talk a little bit about the innovation process and how that comes to be? Or
Well, we do have an amazing team. I think you cannot do anything alone. There's a very interdisciplinary process that is different from, like in my case, from other bars. I work with the kitchen, and the kitchen works with the bar. We're always sharing ideas. We also have the autonomy to think in an individual way. Like, for example, we have like a creative team, but it's not a creative team per se. It's like people that work at the restaurant. They bring different ideas and we work them together, but they can also present individual ideas, and then we all together start working on that specific idea. And something that we do is we give the concepts, like for the bird watching series, I said, like, okay, so Tim, this is what I think we should be working in. And everybody started reading about birds, and everybody started listening to the birds in their backyards and coming with ideas, and then we all together started adding to those ideas. And in the kitchen it's the same. I mean, it depends. It's not like a rigid process. Sometimes they have ideas, sometimes my mother have ideas, sometimes it's something that just transforms in the process. So it started as something very different and ended up being something else. But yeah, we work all together. And yes, we have an amazing team. One thing that we do know is that we love long-term relationships, and there's people working with us since 10, 12, 13, 15 years. That is something that I always say to whenever I'm hiring someone new. It's like, I'm into long-term relationships, so please, if you're going to say yes, that this is going to be like a project. It's not something that you just come for 1 year or 2 years. Like, I need us to become, I won't like to say a family, because it's just the family thing in the enterprises but I need us to be complementary.
what is the value of a long-term relationship for the business, for the work you do? Why is that important?
You don't have to explain. You start to use telepathy. You don't have to explain yourself in a basic way. There's something, the minds know each other's.
Yeah. You mind meld a little bit.
Yeah. And something that I love to work with my team too, because they know how I think, I know how they think, and things become more efficient.
What role does values play in that? Shared values, common culture, trust, and decision making?
I'm going to tell you a story. Right now, I'm in the process of finding a bar manager, because we have the production manager and the creative manager. More than manager, like creative chief and production chief. And we've been taking our time, because something that we all want, is we want a groupie. We need someone that actually dies for working with us. We want a fan. We want someone that tells us that working at Leo or La Sala de Laura is something that he or she's been dreaming of. Because you cannot imprint passion in people. That's something that you cannot do. So first, we want to work with someone that knows that that's the right place. And then we start working in, yes, sharing values. We start working in incentives, like traveling abroad, like doing some stash, like going together to a farm and visit a producer together, and doing like other stuff that also are important to build the team. But I think passion and owning it and being sure that this is the place that you want to work.
It's kind of the opposite of hospitality, where there tends to be a lot of turnover. And even in any job, most people work someplace for 2 to 5 years and then they move on for a new experience or seeking other fulfillment. So I think as a manager, that's maybe what I would imagine the hardest part is like continuously creating fulfillment. And I'm wondering how you've thought about that. It sounds like you have part of like travel with us or do this or like a milestone or something you unlock. But how do you manage continuous fulfillment when you have a big, diverse team?
Are cycles. And sometimes cycles end up in 5 years, for 4 years, 6 years, and I won't stop that. Whenever I feel someone in my team needs to move on, I just talk about it with that person, and I totally understand the moment. And it's just something that you cannot control. But what you can control is that everyone that works or that had worked at Leo at least can, still contribute to different projects from a different point of view. And that those people that worked with us, no matter if it was for 2, 3, 4 years, start spreading our philosophy and all the things that they have learned all together with the team in other spaces. So I mean, it's something that you cannot control. I mean, you cannot tell someone, I need you all my life. I wish. I mean, I could have a partner in this, because that's what I aim to. But I also understand that we are humans and cycles are cycles.
What is the vision that you hold? So the vision of Leo, the work you do, what's the vision that you rally people around?
We have a higher purpose and position in Colombia as a gastronomic country. We have the higher purpose of telling the whole world that Colombia is an amazing country, that it's multicultural, that is biodiverse, that is innovative, that is full of great people, and that has lots of stories to tell besides negative perceptions that international community might have. So yeah, I mean, that's it. Gastronomy is a tool, but we want people to have experiences. We want to change mindsets. We want to make people to have fun. I think fun is a very underrated word, because fun is always underrated. I mean, when people ask me, what do you want to do? And you say, I want to be happy, is seeing like something that's not serious enough. But making people have fun is a very important thing in the world.
If you're not having fun, why are you doing it? Yeah,
Yes,
that's so important. I would love to just tap into your wisdom now, because you've been at this since 2008. That's a lot of years. What I love so much about the experience I had within the world of Leo, and what I've just learned following you on the internet and listening to other podcasts and everything, is how you're really thinking so deeply about how do we use gastronomy as a tool for social transformation. And I would love to have you riff on like key lessons learned, or things that if, restaurateurs or people in other countries were thinking of, I could do this for my country. I could put my country on the map and spotlight the biodiversity and all the goodness that we have, all the stories we have, and the celebration of culture that is where we are, that we don't have to all meld to the same one idea of what's good. What would be the lessons you'd share? Because this is, you've been at this as a long time, and I know it's lifelong work. And like you mentioned before, it's political, it's infrastructure, it's financial, it's social. It's like a lot of different forces that you are slowly moving. So what lessons would you pass on to others?
Yes. Okay. So you have to hold on the idea that you have. You have to be stubborn, and stubborn costs. Stubborn costs money, costs time, and some time is not. I mean, you want just to stop and not keep going, because it's not an easy road. But you have to believe, and you have to believe in those values, and you have to be. Yes, you have to also accommodate. You have to sometimes make people in your country to feel uncomfortable of doing the same things in the same way. So that is not easy. And always bring up the values of sustainability. Always get to know the traditional knowledge. There's no innovation if there's no traditional knowledge. And also aim to innovate. innovation is the key. You cannot keep traditions in a cage. You have to innovate them in order for them to evolutionate. You have to educate local clients and raise awareness, but you also have to look for policy support and always do research. Please just don't innovate out of nothing. Sometimes I see people that is innovated without an immersive work, and you have to do the job. You have to do your nails, you have to get your hands dirty, and you have to work with the base of the pyramid, because food, it's a chain and it's a pyramid, and the chefs and the consumers at the top of that pyramid, what you want to transmit and what you want to do, it has not the same strength if it's not based in people that is down that pyramid.
Who is at the base of the pyramid, or what is at the base?
Small producers. In the agro industry, you have to also work. It's not at the base, but you also have to work with that. And yeah, producers. I mean, people that wake up every morning and grow all the food that we eat.
You mentioned earlier that Leo is really, it's a voice, it's a channel, it's a way of transmuting this knowledge. What do you see as the possibility or the inspiration, or what's available for restaurants all around the world and how they can impact their local food system? Like, what role does the restaurant play in food system transformation?
The most important role, because it's the role of consumer education, raising awareness, using the different ingredients in innovative ways, being the voice for the base of the pyramid, and also communication. We are the voice. We are the last link in the chain. My invitation, is to be responsible for being the last link in the chain.
I wonder what opportunities have opened up for you now. You, again, have been at this a long time. Your profile and your star has risen. There's global recognition now around what you're doing. And there is a shift in terms of people understanding what is happening in Colombia and how amazing it is. And not just in Colombia, but so many other countries that have just not gotten the spotlight that they deserve or that's possible. And I wonder what role you see yourselves playing now. Are you involved in high-level political discussions? Is it like, how do we do more financing? What doors have opened since you started this journey?
You have to be involved in policy, definitely. Politics is very important. I used to work hand in hand. We used to work together with local mayors, with the Vice Ministry of Tourism, with also institutions like Colombia, for example. Those in different countries are like working with tourism and image of the country in the world. Yes, we definitely have to work with them. Sometimes it's very hard because, especially in Latin America, these institutions are bureaucratic, almost academic, and it's quite complicated. But definitely, it's something that you have to work hand in hand, because chefs, cooks have become also a way of doing diplomacy, also a way of showing and showcasing cultural identities, ingredients. So yes, definitely, that's something that you have to do. I've always been, and with my mother, we've always been involved in these discussions. We love politics in terms of bringing ideas into policy lines. So that's something that for us is very important, though it's becoming very hard lately.
I'm curious to hear more about how one, as a restaurateur, can get involved in that conversation, and how you have managed to bring up that point of view or put the spotlight, like any tips there that you would pass on.
Well, at the beginning, it was very hard because no one knows what gastronomy for development was. And gastronomy for development, I mean, people couldn't understand that. Like, but what do you do? I mean, how is it gastronomy for development? Can you just explain a little further? I'm not understanding. And then different movements that were including social transformation words, just gave some light to this gastronomy for development idea. and people started to understand the power of food in development. But at the beginning, it was like I was talking in a different language. So convincing organizations and also mayors and vice ministries and the whole government of it was very complicated. It's not like Peru, for example. Peru had something amazing, that the first tool for international positioning, it was gastronomy. So it was all the resources of the state into that. In Colombia, the problem is that we've been through a peace process that hasn't been easy, and the government had to allocate the resources into priorities. And those priorities were infrastructure, those priorities were building the peace, those priorities were, giving health and education to the population of the country. So when you have all these priorities, you cannot invest in gastronomy. It's something that is not on the list. But now that we've been coming out of this process, and that Colombia is more open, and that we have other issues to manage, then gastronomy has become something that, the government is more keen to help, to support.
And what is the power of food for development?
Gastronomy as a tool for development makes more solid the identities, the cultural identities of the country. It also preserves the biological and cultural patrimony of communities in a country. You can also help in the preservation of different species that are used for culinary purposes, for food purposes. It helps in diversifying the diet. It helps in communities to better their income and their well-being. Food has the power to change not just into a more sustainable world that values the cultural identities, but also that values the biodiversity and the health of our population.
I think we've always seen in food in history or what I get is that it's a source of pride, like beautiful pride and celebration, but also a deep connection to nature in a way for us to convey, but also our sustenance. It's just so basic. It is that base of the pyramid or the building block of life that connects us to everything else. And it feels like an underrated tool. It feels like it, at least for me, I feel there's so much more we can do and explore. And this question, which is a big question, is still being answered. I think we're still exploring. Like, it's hard to answer it because there's so much and there's so many more possibilities. And so it's like, that's why I've already been in this myself for 6 years, because I keep finding new rabbit holes to go down. It doesn't get boring.
Yes, I know. But I definitely think that through gastronomy, we can generate commercial channels between rural and urban areas, and educating in areas such as cuisine, diversification, management of local products, good cooking practices as well. We can talk also about sustainable tourism, nutrition, health, and also promotion of areas, of regions and countries in strengthening these cultural and these identities.
So another hard question for you, and now it's the last 4 questions that every guest on this show has ever been asked. The first question is, what is your vision for the future of food?
I think our commitment in the claiming of Colombian culinary traditions and the promotion of biodiversity, and I think a vision of the future of food could emphasize in definitely sustainable farming and biodiversity, like having a wider, or introducing a wider variety of crops into diets worldwide, also reducing dependency on monocultures and enhancing food security. I have no bad things to say about globalization per se. I think we're interconnected, but we definitely have to work in being more independent in terms of food security. Also, relying in traditional knowledge. I think we have to revive indigenous and local knowledge of food cultivation. Also, preparation, consumption. We need to enrich these global food cultures with sustainable practices. And that is something that is a key in achieving that. I believe culinary innovation. I think we have to combine traditional ingredients and methods with modern culinary techniques. And we're going to need to be able to create innovative dishes that can adapt, to changing climates and tastes. And that might seem a little bit contradictory with what I've just said. We need to think in terms of innovation and in terms of, bringing modern food that can adapt to our needs right now, but always preserving local economies and always doing it in a capitalism that can just bring all the different economies together, and can be more inclusive. So I adore innovation, I think, and I have been just talking about innovation all along the conversation. And it's the way that we innovate, and it's how we impact, people in the world. We cannot see innovation as part of the sauvage capitalism. We have to see innovation rooted in knowledge, in sustainability, and in biodiversity.
I can hear how passionate you are about this. And I'm wondering, why do we need to allow for the traditions to evolve? What's important about creating space for that change and creating space for innovation?
Sometimes I think tradition has to be touched in order to be preserved, but it has to be touched in a respectful way.
Mm-hmm.
You cannot be a chef and just add something that is out of context to a recipe and say that that's innovation. You have to work it together with the region or with the people that are represented by that tradition. You need to make sustainable practices around innovating the tradition. It's a whole debate, but I think that innovation has to be seen something that we need to include in our daily activities, but always thinking of it as a way to grow and to evolve, and not something that's going to just erase everything that we've just done.
I also have a degree in innovation management and business as well. And when I work in this space and I work with entrepreneurs and people who are really spending a lot of time creating and bringing to life the what's next, where is the world going? What's next? What are the next things we're going to experience in our world? The role of history is so critical. And it is like a canon of work, going back to that artistic analogy of like, there is an importance of knowing and building upon the canon or all of the thought that has come before. And most ideas aren't 100% new, or there's a path dependency of how we arrived at that idea. So doing your homework of researching, like, how did we get to the current state of what this is? And what's the history of this industry or this dish or this thing, of why that matters? But then also understanding, like, well, where are we now? What's available to us now? How do things work now? Because of course the world evolves and things need to evolve with the world. And it's a marriage between the two. But I always think there's more room for us to do, like even podcasting, what we're doing right now. Podcasting is storytelling. We've been doing storytelling for a really, really long time. It's just an evolution of storytelling in a different way that makes it more accessible. But it's nothing where we're like, we innovated with podcasting and this is a whole new medium. It's like, no, it's just passing information through stories. That's been done around the campfire for a long time. So I think it's worth understanding how things used to be and what they look like now, and really feeling those parallels or similarities of just like, it's a new incarnation or reincarnation. It's not completely novel. So when we think of this vision for the future, what are we missing to get there? What's needed?
Okay, definitely policy support. I think we need to encourage from a civil society. We need to encourage to support sustainable agriculture. We need to vote with the fork. We cannot just start talking about how much we need the world to change, but our way of feeding us every day is just not in tune with what we predicate. We need to start informing ourselves a little bit more. And I know informing ourselves takes a lot of time, because traceability is just almost impossible in the way that we live right now. I mean, I'm not just looking, at each informational table, ingredients, it's so hard. But we need to do better choices. We need to protect, indigenous land rights here in Colombia and Latin America. Is super important to promote fair trade practices. As we have said, research and development. We need to identify, to promote underutilized crops. We need to promote also to develop, climate resilient farming techniques. This is something that is affecting us. The climate change is a reality, and we need to adapt to it. We need to increase global awareness. I think these spaces, like the space that we both are having together right now with all the audience, is exactly that, raise importance about the biodiversity, about the traditional culinary practices, the sustainable food systems, is something that we have to keep talking about. But also, more than talking, start voting with the fork. I'm going to say it again. Please, we have to support those industries that really are being sustainable, that really impact in a positive way communities. We have to stop saying that we are pescatarians and having this industry salmon that has no sustainability at all. No, it's not about being vegetarian. It's not about being vegan. That's something that if someone wants to choose it, I mean, it's great, but it's about having some traceability and getting to know with this decision who I'm impacting. Because, for example, there's a lot of great cattle initiatives that are based in the forest and in conservation. So it's not about just saying, I'm not eating meat. It's about who is impacting that you eat. Are you buying from small producer? Are you buying from the urban initiative in your neighborhood in New York? Because I know there are many. Are you preferring local products, or are you just giving, I don't know, something that travels from miles and miles and miles and miles?
I have to give a shout out to this because I think that's the first thing that any listener or consumer can do when we talk about voting with the fork, is just like doing the work to buy high quality ingredients where you live. And it is going to take work on your part. It may or may not already exist. Someone may or may not have aggregated it, but really understanding the seasonality or buying direct from the farmer or upgrading the quality. Those are all things that make such a big impact, and they have a huge ripple effect. I live in New Jersey. I live between Europe, the States, and Mexico, actually. But like right now, I'm in New Jersey. I grew up in New Jersey. New Jersey's tagline is the Garden State. But I've never thought of it really as the Garden State. I was like, ha ha ha, it's really the armpit of New York, or where mobsters are, or like the poor red Italian sauce. And I've recently started meeting more and more chefs they're making it a hotspot for gastronomy and celebrating the roots we have as a garden state, because we're actually like parallel with California, and you can get most of the things you need in season. And there are people raising pigs to make ham in the same style that they do in Iberico ham. But I had no idea. I didn't know I could go forage for mushrooms. I've never looked at my own backyard in that way. I always thought that, again, going back to, it's something that happens elsewhere. It's not something that happens where I live. But of course it can, and it does happen. I just wasn't aware of it, and I wasn't tapped in. My eyes were not open. So for most, I think that's a really good place to start. Start gaining that knowledge and understanding what food system are you actually a part of, where you live, wherever that might be.
It takes time. It takes time because rational decisions take time, but you have to do your work.
You have to do the work. You have to do the work 100%. And none of us can escape that. When it comes to the work that you're doing, what collaborations help are you looking for? I always give an open mic to every guest because we have people listening from all around the world. And the show is about collaboration, creating connections, and really spreading great ideas. So where is it that you could use help or would like to collaborate more?
Well, we have, as a foundation, as an NGO, we have a way of working with communities, and something that we would like to replicate in different parts of the country is the SOTEA success. SOTEA is a project gained in the Pacific and experienced that gained in the Pacific. And we are currently establishing other partnerships, in order to expand this development model.
Is that with Restaurant Soleil?
No, Sotea,
Okay.
and actually, if you want to know a little bit more about Sotea, you can go Zotea, like with Z.org. It's a community project that held in the Pacific Coast, along with the Fundación Choco Emprende and the community, and is a model that's based on a restaurant, but also a garden and a touristic experience for visitors to get to know more about the community and their gastronomy by visiting Sotea, by getting to know more about their biodiversity. And we really want to work together with other organizations, international organizations, in order to expand this model that we've called Centro Integral de Gastronomía, which is like a comprehensive gastronomy center, and to become places of knowledge, of exchange, where opportunities for communities are held, kitchens where preparations with local ingredients are made, as well as projects that look after biodiversity and construction of a peaceful and egalitarian society through gastronomy. So yes, we need a little bit of like much of international help in bringing our dream a reality, and it's exactly that. It's Colombia is that we can have these centers all along the country.
What's the best way for someone to get in touch with you or with Sotea? How can they reach out?
Of course. Well, my email is lhernandez@funleo.org. It's fun because fun is foundation in fundación, but in English sounds better. It's FunLeo.
Because you guys have fun, as we talked about. Having fun is important.
And please write to me if you have a nice offer. We're not accepting volunteers right now because we work with projects, and right now we're in the fundraising stage of a big project that we want to do in Pozón. Pozón is a very, very vulnerable neighborhood in Cartagena, which is our hometown. So right now we are in the process of fundraising, but yeah.
Perfect. So good. Well, thank you so much for coming on and for sharing your story and what you've been up to. And it's going to be exciting to continuously track what's next. I still feel that this is just the beginning, even though we've been doing it for a while, but it's just the beginning. The best is yet to come. And there's so much to look forward to.
Thank you, Annalisa, for your interest in us, in FunLeo, in Colombia. It's very important for us to have these kind of spaces so the world can hear what's happening in Colombia and what we're working in, and also to inspire others, but also that others can inspire us. And thank you so much.
Thank you. All right, that's all for today. What'd you think? If you enjoyed this episode, leave a 5-star review or a comment with your thoughts. You can also send me a message directly on LinkedIn or Instagram. I'm Annalisa Winther on both platforms. I also love hearing about your wins and what inspired you about this episode, so please share that with me as well. If you really liked it, consider becoming a subscriber of the show. Doing so gives thanks to me and also supports the creation of more awesome content like this. You can sign up to become a subscriber using the link down here in the show notes. And if you'd like to learn more about working with me, you can read about my coaching programs and investor services on my website, www.annalisawinther.com. Thanks again for listening, and a reminder to hit that subscribe button to be updated about new episodes. I'll see you next time.